I didn't grow up in this church physically, but spiritually I grew up here. In 1973, I was sort of on the outside looking in, and from then I grew up and became the lay servant and the lay leader that I now am. My biggest memory of this church was the most devastating day that this church has ever seen, which was July 6th, 2006, when we were devastated by an arson fire. 3 individuals broke into the church that evening and set fire in 2 places with the intent of burning down the sanctuary. And you can still see remnants of that spot in the back of the sanctuary on the roof even today. After the fire, I've been on every committee that the church has experienced. I was the first one in the church after the fire. Pastor Miner asked me to come in and pick up the cross so we could worship at the high school the following Sunday. As I entered the church, I didn't understand that the lights had been turned off. Consumers Power had turned the power off. The windows had been boarded, so it was dark in here. Now, I've walked the aisle hundreds of times, but that particular day I had to touch each and every pew as we moved forward, not remembering that there were a couple of steps. So I tripped over the steps and I actually crawled to the altar. When I got to the altar, I did say a prayer, and it wasn't something that was real meaningful, but it was memorable. I prayed that the church would be okay. I didn't pray for me, but I wanted a sign that the church was going to be okay. As I stood up after my amen, I put my left hand on the altar, and I tapped my way around to the back where the cross was sitting on a shelf. And I got the cross in my right hand and continued to tap my way around till I was at the front of the altar again. And I would be looking at the choir loft where we have an eternal flame. And that flame was actually lit. And I couldn't believe it was lit because there was no power in the building. But as sure as I'm sitting here, that eternal flame was lit. And it was a devastating time for this church. But in the long run, it did bring us all together. We had a common goal to rebuild. It made us spiritually better. Dan Miner brought us up from the ashes, and probably one of the most devastating things in his life that he ever had to do too.
So one of the highlights of my ministry here was my relationship with Gordon Lunt. And it started when Gordon had been attending the church, and we, a group of us, had been going out for lunch after church for a long time at the Michelle's restaurant. So we invited Gordon to come along with us, and Gordon started coming on a regular basis. And I got to know Gordon a bit more then, and we often would talk about kayaking, and he's like, I've always wanted to kayak, and so eventually we got to the place where I've got a couple kayaks, Gordon, I live on Lake Cora, and he's like, oh, it just so happens I have a relative who lives on Lake Cora, and so we planned this day in which we were able to get out on our kayaks and go over to the cousin's place and spent most of the day together either at the cousin's or on the lake kayaking around, and it just kind of went from there in terms of we'd get together for lunch a few times, just Gordon and Lori and I. He had this place. He had a couple favorite restaurants, but there was one right outside of Pawpaw that he really liked to go to, this pancake place. And he's like, we've got to go there. And so we did a couple times. So I got to know Gordon. And then it really, he got sick, and didn't realize that he had any money until I think it might have been either close to when he died or after he died, that he actually was a fairly wealthy man, and that he wanted to share that money with this church because we had kind of surrounded him with love in his last few years, and so it was a privilege then to be able to receive a considerable donation on behalf of the church from his estate, and this church has benefited a lot from that ever since.
And I'm often thinking about the times and the years that we spent together here at Parchment United Methodist Church. It was a time of transition in so many ways. It was a time where we were trying to figure out what it is that our purpose is and why are we called here to be this church. Some of the things that I really resonated with was when people were telling us about how this used to be the community church for Parchment. We have one of the best sanctuaries in the whole town. It's just a lovely space, and many of the other churches are a little bit smaller, and we were the community church back 100 years ago when we met in the community house. And when we built this building, it was designed to be a church in the center of the community. And so we wanted to reclaim that role again. So many of the former pastors had done all of this work all along, and we were continuing that good work. We started to do a wonderful event on Halloween. We started with trunk or treat, and then we moved into a warming station and created a space for families to come to warm up while they're out trick-or-treating. You know, in Michigan, it often snows. And so they would come in, they would meet their neighbors, they would get some snacks, they would find a place of hospitality, bathrooms and friendship and a table and place to rest. And we're trying to build community. We also were intentional about having community dinners that were not just for the church community, but for our neighbors. Things like that, we were recognizing that there was the needs in our community. Along the way, our Cub Scout troop came to us and said, we've recognized that there may be the need for a food pantry, a blessing box, and we would like to partner with you. Can we, the Cub Scouts, build a blessing box, and can we have it here at the church? And between the Cub Scouts and the congregation, can we fill this with good things? The church was thrilled. The Cub Scouts were thrilled. They painted it blue and gold, which are the colors of the Cub Scouts. And we really recognized a wonderful opportunity to share food with others. That's a calling that God has placed upon all of God's people, to care for those who are hungry, feed those who have need. And so the blessing box appears. We install it, we fill it up with good things. It empties out in just a few hours. We fill it up again. It empties out again. It's amazing how it works.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I've been a member of this church since I was born. I was baptized here. My grandparents went to church here. My mom attends church here still, and I have many stand-in grandmas here I'm very thankful for. One of my best memories in the church was during our youth group outings. We would go skiing, and that's where I learned to ski. Janine Dosa taught me how to ski. I am very thankful for the church scholarship here, the Lunt Fund. I've gone through nursing school now, and I really appreciate the help that's given me. Currently, I volunteer at the monthly food distributions. I volunteer after Sundays with coffee, tea, and conversation. Basically, whatever my mom ropes me into. I like to volunteer at the Holiday Bazaar, Rally Day, you name it.